I actually, before I begin, I have a dedication for this sermon. There was a young man who came into my office unsure of whether or not he wanted to celebrate having a bar mitzvah, celebrate becoming bar mitzvah. He was unsure if our tradition had a place for him. And he expressed some of his concerns, and then I addressed them, and I noticed he was listening, but sort of more looking around my office. And when he saw a pride flag that Meredith had recently got for me, he opened up to the idea. And we will be celebrating his bar mitzvah this winter. And so this sermon is dedicated to him and to all other people who aren't sure that they are part of our tradition. Hello. My name is Howard Goldsmith. I live in New Rochelle with my wife Jennifer and my children Lev and Talia. And I recently had to face my own ingrained prejudice. Apparently, prejudice dies hard. I consider myself a very open-minded and accepting person. From this pulpit, I preach about the dangers of racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hate, anti-Asian hate, all forms of discrimination. I do my fair share of interfaith and intergroup work to make sure that I'm connected with a diversity of leaders in our area. For 2 years, I was president of the Westchester Board of Rabbis, so on a regular basis, it was like the setup of a bad joke. A priest, an imam, and a rabbi walk into a county event. In other words, I strive to be open and accepting, to meet people where they are, to spread the message of acceptance and inclusion, to live that out in my actions and in our congregation. And so a recent conversation sort of threw me for a loop. Let me give you a little background. As you have probably read, our congregation has taken on a new initiative in support of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, led by our Director of Education, Jackie Kurland. We have always strived to be accepting and welcoming, with a history of pride Shabbats, appropriate bathroom signage, and messages from the pulpit and in the weekly email. Yet shocked by the horrendous attack at a gay nightclub in Colorado last year, our lay and professional leadership that it was time to double down on our support of the LGBTQ community. It was time to ensure that our congregation went way beyond tolerance, beyond welcoming, beyond even inclusion, and all the way to a sense of belonging. We need everyone to know, especially the teens, that we are a safe place for the diversity of gender expression for anyone, regardless of their sexual orientation. We need to ensure that everyone feels not only acceptance, but sees their identities reflected in our advocacy, our programs, our religious school curriculum, our ritual, and even, yes, our paperwork. So given all of this effort, I felt that I had a pretty good understanding of the needs of the LGBTQ community and what I could do to ensure that Emanu-El met those needs. Now, back to this aforementioned conversation. Jackie and I were on a Zoom call with a person named Dubs Weinblatt. Dubs is a renowned speaker, expert, and trainer in the LGBTQ space. We were speaking with them about coming to do an October training for our lay leaders and then coming to speak at our annual Social Justice Shabbat in January. I'm pleased to say they will be doing both. Our call was wrapping up, and they asked if I had any other questions. Well, actually, if you have a minute, I said, I've been struggling with something, and I could use your help. Sure, Dubs said. Happy to help. I continued, well, I've been trying to figure out a way to allow people space to share their pronouns without it looking like virtue signaling. They responded, tell me more. What do you mean? Okay, I said, given our typical congregant, I feel sort of awkward asking people to share their names, kid names, hometown, and pronouns. It feels more like virtue signaling rather than an authentic show of support. But I want to show support, and I want to show it in a way that feels authentic and, frankly, doesn't elicit any eye rolls. Dubs responded patiently. Look, first of all, no one ever has to share pronouns. You could simply say, please tell us your name, the names of your kids, your hometown, and if you'd like, your pronouns. And in terms of it feeling authentic, rather than feeling like virtue signaling, that's not about how you ask. That's about how you feel. If you authentically want to be welcoming to people who use other pronouns, then you will authentically offer for people to share their pronouns. If you do not authentically want a safe space for sharing pronouns, then asking them will indeed feel like virtue signaling. I saw myself on the Zoom screen as what they said sunk in. Ah, yeah. Okay, I'm really glad you're coming to do some training. Dub smiled and said, me too. Congregation Emanu-El of Westchester is firmly committed to meeting the full diversity of our congregants wherever they are on their Jewish journeys. That guides all of the decisions that we make: our programming, our education, our leadership style, our publications, and all the ways that we present ourselves to the broader community. And one of the things I've always known to be true is that we cannot meet people where they are in their Jewish journey without first meeting the people. We need to meet them, meet their full selves. People need to feel seen and heard, welcome and included, before they walk with us on whatever Jewish journey they happen to be on. This is true if you are Ashkenazi or Sephardi, from the Northeast or from the Southwest, grew up conservative or Reform, are an interfaith family or an in-married couple, if you grew up in the middle of the 20th century or came of age in the early 21st century, if you are gay or straight, cisgender, trans, or non-binary. For us to walk together on your Jewish journey, you need to feel comfortable bringing all of yourself to the congregation. This desire to meet people is not true of all religious groups. Indeed, the very loud anti-LGBTQ messages from certain religious groups cause some to think that all religion disapproves of homosexuality. Perhaps you remember the verse from Leviticus that says, "Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman." In other words, you might be sitting here thinking, doesn't the Bible say that being gay is wrong? Well, to rely overmuch on any one verse of the Bible is to go down a very dangerous road. Our ancient texts contain plenty of verses which our later rabbis have undone. Capital punishment, for example, is in our Torah. But later rabbis in the first few centuries of the Common Era declared that any court that condemns a single person to die within a 7-year time frame, that is a cruel court with blood on its hands. Indeed, there is no capital punishment in Israel today. The book of Exodus introduces lex talionis, an eye for an eye. The cruelty of this caused the rabbis to interpret it as a stand-in for pecuniary or monetary compensation for injury. There are also verses that we simply reject rather than reinterpret. In the book of Numbers, we read of the Israelites stoned to death for collecting wood on Shabbat. In Deuteronomy, the Torah tells us that if you have a rebellious son, you should bring him before the town elders at the gates of the city so that everyone can stone him to death. There are plenty of verses. People are laughing because they're thinking of their kid. There are plenty of verses that all Jews simply reject or ignore, even more verses that our tradition has reinterpreted. So what of the few verses that seemingly reject homosexuality? Accepting those verses as divine truth without also stoning a rebellious son to death is simply to reveal one's own hypocrisy, perhaps one's own homophobia. As Reformed Jews, we read beyond the narrow surface of biblical text to the larger messages that pervade our sacred scriptures. Proverbs 3:17 asserts the essence of the Torah. Deracheha darcheino an v'chol netivoteha shalom. Torah's ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. In other words, Torah should result in peace and pleasantness. So if a commandment in the Torah demands something that is unduly unpleasant or not peaceful, that means that we are reading it wrong. No commandment can provoke hostility. As we keep this big picture front and center, we come to recognize that the seemingly anti-gay statements in our biblical texts are from an utterly different time, place, and context. The subject of those verses have almost nothing to do with loving, consensual, family-focused love between two men and two women. The preponderance of Torah, describing God's love, the holiness of each person, and the need to pursue justice, overwhelms the few seemingly anti-gay verses. Not only does the overall thrust of the Torah cancel out a few hateful verses, we now also know the science of human sexuality. We know that some fixed percentage of the population is gay, lesbian, or bisexual. We know that transgender and non-binary people do not choose that identity. It is core to who they are as humans, as core as any identity that anyone has. And the science matters. Judaism demands that we seek wisdom wherever we can find it, including science. Proverbs chapter 6 says that if you want to know truth, you should go study the ways of the ant. You should look to nature. The great sage Maimonides said that if we seek truth, we must study the natural world, math, physics, and logic. If some part of the Torah seems to contradict science, then we are reading that part of the Torah incorrectly. This commitment to science and objective fact is not universal in all faith traditions, not even in some extreme corners of the Jewish people. Unfortunately, many use the Bible as a cudgel to condemn gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. But doing so only reveals homophobia. For every verse that seems to condemn LGBTQ people, there are dozens affirming the value of every human being, dozens that affirm God's love for all of us, dozens that affirm the value of love and partnership among people. For many of us, LGBTQ issues impact people we know, care about, and love. For those of us who do not identify as LGBTQ, we have privilege that we can use to help fight discrimination broadly and to help make Emanu-El a place of belonging for all. This has always mattered, but perhaps now more than ever. Other religious groups, homophobic religious groups, have dominated the national conversation about LGBTQ issues. They have tried to say that God hates gays. They have tried to say that religious teachings deny gender diversity. They have used these religious arguments in ways that cause LGBTQ youth to attempt suicide at a rate 4 times higher than their peers. In fact, one LGBT youth attempts suicide every 45 seconds. Why? Because of the discrimination, distortion, misunderstanding, and hatred perpetrated against those youth, so often from religious stances. How on earth can you call something religious that leads to suicide? Is there really a God that would desire, that would condemn youth created in God's own image to depression, isolation, torment, and suicide? That's not any God I would believe in. That's not a religion any of us can countenance. Tragically, we see this playing out in states around the country. There are currently nearly 500 bills in state legislatures which seek to limit the rights or protections of LGBTQ people. So-called accurate ID laws would prohibit trans people from updating their gender on various government documents. Some bills seek to weaken non-discrimination laws so that employers, businesses, and hospitals could turn away LGBTQ people or refuse them equal treatment. School boards and state and local governments are attempting to ban books from libraries and schools that address LGBTQ subjects. There are a huge range of bills that seek to deny trans people the best gender-affirming care as recommended by the American Pediatric Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Medical Association. In addition, some states would deny LGBTQ people equal access to public accommodations, and others would prevent school teachers from even discussing or even mentioning the existence of LGBTQ people. Imagine if your parents were same-sex and your teacher couldn't refer to them by their pronouns. The fight starts here at home. What does it look like? First, support our congregation's LGBTQ belonging efforts. If you're on a committee, come to the training with Dubs on October 5th. Not on a committee and want to come? Great, you can come. Call me. See the film The Cake Maker on October 19th with our film group. If you have an LGBTQ loved one, come to a meeting on Sunday, October 22nd on supporting and understanding your loved one. Do not miss our Social Justice Shabbat in January when Dubs will speak on the current state of LGBTQ inclusion in the Jewish world. Let teens know about the new Westchester Jewish Teen LGBTQ group, sponsored by Keshet Moving Traditions and hosted at Congregation Kolami in White Plains. And finally, please come to Pride Shabbat in June. We can show our support by showing up. We are providing ample opportunities to do just that. And then, let's tell our friends and family about our congregation's effort, our religious efforts. We can post it on Facebook and Instagram. We can tell our kids and our adult children. When we see articles talking about religious hostility towards the LGBTQ community, we can comment on those articles or send letters to the editor that describe our congregation's religious efforts to foster belonging. We can change the narrative about religion and the LGBTQ community. Together, we can show that the message of religion is not anti-LGBTQ. We can instead show that we believe that authentic religion fosters community and love, meets people where they are, helps them bring more goodness and holiness into our world. Religion should help people along life's path, their life's path, the joys and the sorrows. Authentic religion strives to make the world better, this real world a better place. And at its best and its most pure, religion creates beloved communities that help all people realize their full selves, no matter their pronouns. Hello, my name is Howard Goldsmith. I live in New Rochelle with my wife Jennifer, my children Lev and Talia. My pronouns are he, him. And if you'd like, you're welcome to share your pronouns too. Kenya Hiratson.